All right, we got a jam-packed agenda, so we want to get started on time so we can fall behind later, right? We don't want to start behind, right? All right, so welcome. My name's Tim Chick. I am a technical manager for, I always get my name, the Cybersecurity Foundations Directorate within the SCI. Our goal as a group is really to research and transition software engineering tools and practices to really better improve the security and the state of software, right? Not just in our country, but in the world. And so this is what this event is all about. We're glad you all came. This is our second annual event. Hopefully, we'll do it again next year and continue the trend. We are recording these sessions. We hope to publish them post the event. So please, when you're asking questions of the speakers, please try talking to a mic. If you don't have a mic and if you're one of our presenters, please try to at least repeat the question so we can get it recorded for prosperity. So while you're here, like I said, our whole goal here is to improve the state of engineering and the practices, cybersecurity. So please interact with each other, right? The whole idea here is to build some type of community where we can learn and we can grow together. Pretty much everyone here seems to have that interest and that drive to really improve the engineering and security and those types of topics. With that said, our first guest speaker, Kirk Lawrence, is here from DHS. His goal is to transit. While my goal is focused on engineering practices, his is really to improve corporations and their goals and their pledge to improve security, right? And so, please welcome our new speaker.
All right. So first off, thank you to the SCI. For those that may not know, SCI has been a wonderful partner to CISA and our predecessor for, at least for me personally, going back to 2010, but even beyond that, right? That was before my time dealing with cyber, Department of Homeland Security. And, it's been such a fantastic partnership. It doesn't go unnoticed that when CISA kicked off our Secure by Design initiative, Jen Easterly stood at Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh and delivered the initial address about 18 months ago, talking about the need for a more secure world, talking about the need to find a better way to do things because we're killing ourselves doing it the way we're doing it now. And that kicked off the Secure by Design initiative here in CISA. And that kind of brings us all the way to today. Second, thank you for attending and being here and committing to being curious and learning about Secure by Design, software Secure by Design concepts. I was having a conversation about 2 weeks ago with one of my colleagues, Bob Lord, at CISA, and we were prepping a presentation. It was internal. It was for folks that already were tied to Secure by Design in some way, shape, or form. And he was really pushing for, if you know Bob, you know he's a pretty provocative dude, and he likes to really make a statement. And he was like, we got to have a cold open. We have to maybe put a cool video in there that talks about Secure by Design 101. And I was like, Bob, we don't have to do that. The people in the room, they already know what Secure by Design is. And they already know why it's important. We can get straight to the how. For the first time in a year, we don't have to sit around and talk about why Secure by Design is important. And that's how I feel with this room here, right? Everybody here is here for reasons because you feel connected to creating a more secure ecosystem. So really appreciate you being here. Thank you for your time. All right, introduction. Oh my goodness, Secure by Design is hard, am I right? Right, understatement of the year. All right, so to prove this out, we're gonna start with a little activity. Now don't worry, I'm not gonna make you talk to the people next to you. I'm not gonna make you get out of your seats. I'm not gonna make you break off in small groups and present like introverts. I see you. I hear you, I got you, right? All right, it's very simple. We're just going to do a single synchronous clap. All right, so I'm going to count to 3, 1, 2, 3, and we're all going to clap. Fair enough? All right, ready? 1, 2, 3. Perfect, y'all are crushing it. Good job. All right, so now, same concept, but we're going to do a little different. All right, now instead of clapping, on the count of 3, we are going to eliminate classes of vulnerabilities. All right, ready? 1, 2, 3. That's right. Way easier, right? Yeah, so that's kind of the tricky bit, right? It is hard, and we know this, but you know what? We can solve hard problems. right? We can do hard things, and that's why we come here to learn and to share and to kind of work through all the information that we have. Excuse me. Oh, goodness, I skipped something. I'm going to go back. It's tied to this, though. It's because I have a 7- and 9-year-old daughter. And when I told them I was coming here, they don't quite always understand what Dad does, right? It's kind of complicated, and I tried to explain it to them, and they're learning more and more. But I said, do you have any advice for me giving a presentation to a bunch of really smart people who are really interested in this thing? And they said, always start with a joke. Now, you saw one joke. It was okay. But, never underestimate the power of a 9-year-old with an iPad. Because they left, 5 minutes later, they came back with a list of jokes for me to present. And so I chose one here, and I think it's applicable, and we'll get it, and I think you'll understand why. So the joke that my 9-year-old gave me was, after a life of cybercrime, why did the hackers still get into heaven? And the answer? Because they hadn't changed the password to heaven in over 2,000 years. Right? A lot of the stuff that we deal with here in the Secure by Design space is looking at these things that probably should have been fixed a while ago, right? Sometimes they're a little harder than you think, but they're things that we want to work on. So background. All right, so in the past 18 months, this has done a lot. And the first thing we've done is I talk about preaching the gospel of Secure by Design, right? Now, I'm going to say it out loud just so we're all on the same page. I know that CISA did not invent Secure by Design, right? But to quote my friend Alan Friedman, we've just talked about it a heck of a lot over the last year, right? We've been putting out products, if you follow like the Bob Lords or Jack Cable or even Alan Friedman or Lauren Zabierek, right? We have been out preaching this gospel of Secure by Design. Director Jen Easterly as well, going out talking about it. We have talked and talked and talked, right? And I think the thing that I'm seeing is that it's become a part of the lexicon of cybersecurity more so than it ever has been before. And I think that's a good thing, right? Awareness is progress. We're seeing that so many people are coming together and recognizing a need for something different. And this is an idea that's definitely worth exploring, right? And that's why we're all here today. What else have we done? Oh, the pledge. The pledge. If you don't follow CISA, you have no idea what the heck I'm talking about. If you do follow CISA, you know that we have talked a lot about this pledge. At RSA, almost 90 days ago to the date, we released a Secure by Design pledge. The requirement is for software manufacturers. The requirements to sign the pledge was you had to sell enterprise software in America, and you had to commit to showing tangible, publicly documenting your progress against 7 Secure by Design goals. I'll get into those goals a little bit later, but the fun fact about this pledge is that when we put it out at RSA, we had 68 people, or 68 vendors, I should say, that signed the pledge at RSA. Avanti was number 1. Any guesses as to how many vendors have signed the pledge today, 90 days later? What'd you say? 160. Not bad. 189. All right, so we've gone from 68 to 108. I really wanted to be at 200. I really want to be at 200 today, but we've made it, we've seen a tremendous growth, a tremendous amount of interest in this. Fun fact, when we met with EAD, our former cybersecurity division, EAD, Eric Goldstein, before he left CISA, we were setting out our goals for the year. And we all have bosses, we all have performance measures, and mine was, hey, for the Secure by Design pledge, success when rolling out the pledge is to get 30 vendors to sign up. And so we went from, hey, success is 30 vendors, to here we are in August with 189 vendors signed up. It's a movement, people. The train is moving, and we're pretty excited about it, all right? And y'all are all contributing to that, so I'm super grateful. Some other stuff we did. We published some Secure by Design alerts and some Secure by Design blogs. We published lots of stuff. We're publishing more stuff today. I'll talk about what's coming out today. And so mainly, if you're not following CISA, I would encourage you to get kind of looped into some of the stuff that we're doing, whether following on social media, just paying attention to what we post on our websites. There's a lot of material that we're trying to put out, and it's going to be more and more. We started a working group internal to CISA to coordinate all of our work, because there's nothing more frustrating than working with the federal government. There should be more to that sentence. But no, I get it, right? When you have 8 different people across CISA that are all doing something that's similar and they're all giving different messages, and you're like, who the heck am I supposed to be listening to? It's got to be frustrating. So we're making sure with Secure by Design that we're all going to be coordinated, right? So the people on the far left of CISA, the people on the far right side of CISA, and the front and the back, everybody is going to be coordinating, and we're going to have coordinated messaging and make sure that you're getting the same information from everybody. Some of the work streams that we've set up, we've got an economics work stream. We've got one for software manufacturers. We've got one for the customer side and secure by demand. We've got policy. So all of these different areas of secure by design where we think we can have an impact, we're all making sure we work together and come together routinely to ensure that, again, we're not sending mixed messages. Then my friend Alan Friedman, if you know Alan, he is the godfather of SBOM, software bill of materials. He is definitely someone who spent a good chunk of his life talking about that. And we made a lot of progress in getting SBOMs incorporated into how the government is going to operate. We're working on evaluating tooling, looking at ways to operationalize SBOM even more and expand the scope of that and what's within the realm of the possible for that. Open source security, it's a whole different animal, right? It is a unique thing, but we put out the open source security roadmap earlier this year at CISA, and we're really looking at how to apply secure by design to that as well, right? It's a unique set of problems in that my good friend Ava Black always says, on the software manufacturing side, you've got unlimited resources, but limited time, right? Because you got to get everything to market. Whereas on the open source side, you have all the time in the world, but no resources. So it creates a different dynamic and a different set of problems that need to be solved. So that's just a little bit what we've been up to. And just to kind of make sure that we frame everything, this is a slide. Jack Cable was here presenting last year, and I stole this slide straight from his presentation. But this is just a reminder of when CISA talks about secure by design, these are the things we're talking about. These are the principles that kind of guide our vision and our view of things. They're broad, they're high level, and they can be scoped very broadly. But at the end of the day, this is what we want. One, manufacturers need to take ownership of the security outcomes of their products. The burden of safety should never fall solely on the customer. Now, I'm going to say that again, because that's important to me. The burden of safety, the burden of security should never fall solely on the customer. All right? We are asking the vendors to be accountable. And also have radical transparency, right? We want security to be something that is marketable. Right? We want it to be a differentiating factor in how people purchase software. We want you to be able to say, we are a great product because we are a secure product, as well as all the other stuff we do, right? But we want that to be something that's marketable, right? And so that's a big part of that. We want, when we talk about radical transparency, CVEs are a good thing, right? You'd be amazed how many people still think they're not. It is not a negative metric. Right? CVEs are a sign of a kind of a robust code analysis within your organization, right? Having good CVEs means you have a good relationship with the researcher community, and that you're being transparent. And when I talk about CVEs, and I'll say this a lot, timely, accurate, complete, right? Timely CVEs. We've seen some issues with that recently. And then accurate and complete. I'll talk a little bit more about later, but that's just kind of my mantra when it comes to CVEs. And managers should build the organizational structure. Listen, it all comes from the top, right? Secure by design is not an important priority within CISA because I wanted it to be, right? It's because Director Easterly stood up and said, this is going to be important to CISA. This is important to me. This is important to our organization. It's a priority. When I look at some of the work that some of our vendors have talked about, the pledge, I know we're only 90 days into our pledge, and I'll talk more about that, but when the vendors that have shown progress and have shown success in certain areas, it's almost always because their CEO prioritized product security. And so it flows down. And so you see it flow down, and you see one of the vendors I was speaking with recently was like, yeah, and so he was from the security team. And he's like, and so I'm talking to the product. I got the product team together, and I got the dev team together, and we were talking about, hey, this came down. We have to figure out how to prioritize security. And it really is, for them, it became an issue of just reshuffling priorities. It's like, oh yeah, this was already in the queue. We're just going to move it up to the front of the queue, and now we're enabling MFA by default, right? I mean, I make it sound simple. I get that. It's not that simple. But the point is, it needs to start at the top. We know a CISO is going to advocate for security. A CIO will probably advocate for security. But really, we need CEOs, CFOs, CIOs. We need everybody advocating for security and making it a priority. So let's talk about this pledge. All right. We have talked a lot about this over the last 90 days, and I'll continue to talk about it because it's kind of foundational to a lot of what we're doing. And I know there are questions, and I'm going to try to address the questions as I go because I've heard a lot of them. But first, let's just go through the 7 main principles. Now, these are not the only 7 things that encompass the secure by design world. These are just the things that we see most often from a CISA perspective. This is also not the latest and greatest, right? This is not the most recent and novel ways we've seen for people doing exploits. This is the old stuff. Right? This is the stuff that has been around forever, and we're still seeing exploited in the wild. And so that's why we're focusing on this first, from a secure by design perspective. So the first one, increase the use of MFA. Now, if you do follow CISA, we talk a lot about MFA. It's going to enable single sign-on as part of your baseline service, MFA by default, seatbelt chimes, right? To notify the customer that they need to turn on their MFA. Anything like that, all right, that demonstrates measurable progress. That demonstrates progress towards a goal. We're not saying you have to solve it. We're not saying you have to be 100% there if you sign this pledge in a year. We just want you to show progress, right? Because we want to learn from what worked for you, what was easy, and what was hard, and what's troublesome, because that's where we can apply resources, hopefully, to help. I'll tell you a funny story about MFA. So recently there was a high-profile incident, we'll say, and I was talking, and so I was sitting on the beach, because I like to sit on the beach during the summer. I have kids, they play in the water, I sit on the beach, I read, it's fun, right? Who doesn't like the beach? I'm flipping through my work phone because I'm a dork, and I see something coming from my ops chief. He says, hey, can we do a security by design alert about this incident? And I said, I'm on the beach. Does it have to happen right now? And he's like, no, we'll talk on Monday. I was like, great. So I go back on Monday. I researched the incident. And, the vendor said it was the customer's fault. The customer said it's the vendor's fault. But ultimately, the root cause was a lack of MFA. And so my ops chief is like, hey, can you please write a security by design alert about MFA? And I said, no, because I don't know what else I can write. If you follow CISA, that's all we've talked about for like 2 years. We put out a public service announcement. We put out a Schoolhouse Rock video, right? We wrote like Joan the Phone songs about MFA, right? Director Easterly has been on Good Morning America doing hits talking about MFA, grabbing people's phones and doing it on air. Like, we have done so much about MFA. Like, I went to my ops chief, like, I don't know what I can say that is new and different and novel about this particular topic. I can give you a link to a bunch of stuff that we've already done, right? But the point being, like, we have talked about this a lot, and this is definitely something, if you follow Director Easterly, you know that she is advocating for time and time again. Default passwords, y'all. We're still talking about default passwords. Right, here we are. We're talking about default passwords. There are alternatives, right? We could random instance unique passwords. If you need passwords for setup, cool, time-bound them so that they kind of go away. Or don't use passwords at all, right? Whatever. But the fact we're still talking about default passwords, and we're seeing that exploit in the wild, right? We're seeing that as targets, and it's easy targets. Reduce entire classes of vulnerability. Yeah, a little tricky. I know. Rust is going to save the world. I know. I'm not trying to be that provocative this early in the morning. But, talking about like transitioning to memory-safe languages, that's a conversation that a lot of folks are having, right? But there's also, short of that, Christoph Kern at Google published a wonderful paper that I read that's out there. You probably read it as well, back in earlier this year. And they, and talked about some of the things they were doing as far as building like secure building blocks for their developers, about kind of building out these like secure functions, secure libraries that could be leveraged by their developers that eliminated, or mostly eliminated, classes of vulnerabilities, right? So yes, memory-safe languages is something you hear a lot of. We hear a lot more about Rust now than we did before, right? But that's not the only way to achieve this, to make progress towards this goal, right? There are other ways to do it. Publish a vulnerability disclosure policy. Oh, and I'm going to amend that, and manage it, right? I could throw a VDP up on a website. Cool, I got a VDP, sweet, check it out. It's awesome. All right, but if you don't manage it, what's the point? Right? Again, it's having a functioning vulnerability disclosure policy is a mutually beneficial relationship with you and the security researchers, right? It's going to allow you to get people looking at your product in a constructive way. And and it's been proven time and time again to be an effective way to proceed. CVEs, timely, accurate, and complete. Now, what I mean by this, now if you're not, if you don't go down the CV rabbit hole and you just you kind of read them and you don't have to actually complete them, you may not know what the heck I'm talking about. But I think with CVEs, it's one of those, it's a form, there's a lot of fields, there's maybe 2 or 3 things that are required. And what happens is people fill in the 2 or 3 things that are required and they submit, right? And I do it sometimes too on surveys, right? I'm like, 5, submit, right? I'm guilty of it too. So, but what happens is one of the fields that's not required is the CWE field, the common weakness enumeration, which allows us to drill into the root cause of that CVE. Or if it's completed, it's often just kind of mailed in a little bit. It's maybe not the most accurate. And so we're really pushing people hey, so much of this is a data game for us. We have limited resources, right? And we want to apply those resources where we have the most value. So understanding CWE and understand what are the most prevalent root causes of vulnerabilities allows us to apply resources where they can have the most impact. So that's why we say accurate and complete CVEs. And increase the ability for customers to gather evidence. We're talking about logs, right? Please provide logs as part of your basic service. If you're a cloud service provider, if you are a SaaS provider, cool, I get it, but could you please retain your logs for a period of time, 6 months, I don't know, something, right? And have that be a part of your baseline service. That's the kind of stuff we're looking for there. Again, things that haven't always been the case, but the idea is the idea in our head, right, is if you have an incident and you're at your most vulnerable and you need help and the vendor says, okay, I can help you, but it's going to cost you money to get your logs, that doesn't seem very kind. I don't know, but that's my own subjective judgment there. So okay. Secure by design. Let me make sure I didn't miss anything here. All right. So now we're going to secure by demand. Now, the reason I want to talk about this today, you probably don't realize this, but you are a special group. Because today, we have talked very little, CISA, about secure by demand so far in the past 18 months. However, today, because they knew I was coming here to speak, it's not true. Director Easterly is at some other conference in Vegas. I don't know, right? The other conference. And she's going to be giving some comments. And I really tried to confirm this morning, and I was blowing up people 6 o'clock in the morning. I'm 98% sure she's going to be talking about secure by demand. And we're supposed to be releasing our first paper about secure by demand today, right? So the idea here is, when we talked about the pledge, we were talking about the software manufacturing side, the supply side. Secure by demand, we're talking about the demand side. How do we get customers to prioritize security or have security be a differentiating factor in their purchasing decisions, right? And part of that is education, right? Part of that is hey, we're working a lot with K through 12 sector, and you have a lot of folks who are running IT shops for school districts who, again, it's them and 2 other people, and they're how am I supposed to know all the things, right? It's impossible to know all the things. And I get it, and I'm sympathetic. So how can we really distill information down to be most effective for people? All right. So the other thing we've seen is that it's not that customers haven't cared about security, they do. But more often than not, they care about security at the vendor level, right? They're worried about compliance standards. They're worrying about the vendor's IT architecture. Those are the questions they're asking. They're not necessarily asking questions about product security. And so we really want to get that shift from focusing on the vendor security to the product security. So how do we do that? All right, well, I'm going to ask you, if I'm putting out a list of questions that I'm going to give to a customer that they can ask a vendor to see if their product is, quote unquote, secure by design, Anyone have any suggestion? What would be the first question I should ask? Any ideas? CVEs, that's good. I like where your head's at. I got one in the back. Thank you! Yes, shameless self-promotion. Here we go. Have you signed the pledge? Perfect, right? Now, listen, I know signing the pledge doesn't mean anything, right? Fun fact, right? You can sign the pledge and then you can just ghost me and never talk to me again, right? I'm tracking it. I'll know you did it, but there's nothing I can do about it, right? However, the second question you would ask then, well, wait, have you signed the pledge? No? Why not? Guess what? You need to have some talking points ready to answer that question. Yes, I've signed the pledge. Cool. Hey, can you tell me where you publicly have documented all your progress against the pledge? Yeah? Hopefully you can say yes, right? Or else it's going to be kind of an awkward moment for you. All right? So that's where we get to, we can't, CISA, I can't really make people do things. We're not a regulatory agency. My lawyers tell me that all the time. But we can encourage folks, and we can try to kind of influence folks to put pressure where pressure maybe can have an impact. Right? So that's the first question is, hey, pledge, and where are you documenting your progress? And then you're going to start to see some parallels here, right? The third question would be, hey, do you enable MFA by default? Hey, where have I seen that before, right? Oh, hey, is single sign-on part of your baseline service? Right? Starting to give the language to the customer, right? That way you don't have to know everything. We're just going to almost try to give you a script. Ask these questions. Elicit this information from the vendors. What else do we have here? We have, this is very fresh, so I'm having to check my notes to make sure I don't leave anything. Oh, we talked have you eliminated default passwords from your code? Hey, how does the software manufacturer make it easy to install patches? I think I skipped this one earlier. Right? Because I don't know. I'm guessing you're probably like me, right? And then don't make my mom install a security update. Now, my mom's 80 years old. She's fantastic. She's wonderful. But she did not grow up with computers. She's learned to make computers work for her, right? FaceTime with the grandkids, Facebook, anything with faces, she's in. But if she has to do anything that requires more than a single click, I'm getting a phone call and I'm playing IT support from 1,500 miles away. Right? Anyone else? Anyone else been that person? Okay, I see some heads nodding. All right. All right. So, how are you making this easy for us and for your customers? We talked about eliminating classes of vulnerabilities. Again, a little more technical, more applicable to folks in this room, but to the folks, if you're just a customer working for a school system or wastewater sector, you may not be tracking all of the details and idiosyncrasies of that. But we're going to give you language. We're going to give you questions to ask. That at least say, hey, how are you doing this? Do you have a roadmap? If you haven't done it, that's cool, it's hard, but is there a roadmap forward? Have you documented anything publicly? We talked about security logs as baseline part of the service. Oh, and then the one thing that's not in the pledge that we put in this list of questions that we're supposed to put out today, it talks about software supply chain. And I could do a whole another 45 minutes on that, I promise you, right? But with supply chain, the questions that we put out there, do you have an SBOM that we can go look at? Right? We're firm believers in SBOM. We've seen that if you have a published SBOM, it really helps you, especially post-incident, right? To figure out, what do I have? Open source, questions around open source. What open source components have you incorporated into your product? Oh, and not just that, how have you facilitated contributions back to the open source project that you're utilizing to ensure that it is healthy and robust, right? Because we've seen that a lot as well too, where folks not necessarily giving back to the community and the security of the open source project could get compromised. We want to see that people are giving back. We want to see that relationship going back and forth. So anyone see a pattern here, right? Again, it's the pledge goals flipped on their head. Now we're asking customers to ask those questions. And again, a vendor's really got 3 answers. Yeah, I already do that. I'm crushing it. Of course, no problem. I got you. 3, we don't do that yet, but we should and we want to. And here's kind of our path forward for doing that. Or 3, we don't care. We're not going to do it. I'm exaggerating here. And it's not really in our plans to do it, right? But even that, it allows us allows the customer to start differentiating vendors based on security. It at least gives them the tools. Now, is that the only thing that's going to factor in their decisions? Not necessarily. Is that the only thing the vendor is going to focus? No, right? Functionality matters. All the other things matter. But at least it gets to be one of the things that's factored into a procurement decision. And I think that's really important. And I think that's where we can have a tremendous amount of progress. And listen, if you really want to change a $40 trillion industry, we got to start somewhere, and hopefully influencing how people choose to purchase products matters and will be helpful in changing that. All right, where's my clicker? All right, next. All right. So CISA, we've been talking a lot about this for 18 months. We've been doing a lot. Have we had an impact, right? Is the stuff we're doing helping? Honest answer, I don't know. I don't know yet. Now, I chose this emoticon as a shout out to Carnegie Mellon, because for those that don't know, the emoticon was invented at Carnegie Mellon in the early 80s, right? So any old timers around here, you know. My friend here knows, right? All right, so have we had any progress? I don't know yet. Probably is my answer. I think we've had an impact, right? I think we've done good. We just haven't had enough data back to measure and to definitively say where we've done good, where we've not done good, where we need to improve, right? The pledge, I know the pledge, but the pledge is going to give us data. We're going to see where vendors are able to make tangible improvements over the course of a year. And we might say that, like, hey, in MFA and security defaults, we had 200 people that signed the pledge and they all crushed it, right? But they're reducing classes of vulnerability, that was a little trickier, right? And we need to come up with some different ways or different products or offer kind of different approaches that can support the community and help, right? And that's good data to have, but that's data we don't have yet. We are also looking at an economic, doing quantitative economic analysis. That study should begin hopefully within the next couple of weeks to really focus on the cost of secure by design, right? It's not uncommon. Some people, the gut reaction we get when we're like, you should be secure by design, they're like, it's expensive. And it's like, how do you know? I'm like, I don't know either, but like, you don't know either. But we don't have the funds to innovate. Well, let's innovate in security. Why not? Feels like there's an opportunity there. Let's consider that. And then also, like, I come from a program management background, so I'm probably the least technical person in this room. It's been a long time since I had hands on keyboards, so no technical questions. I think, but one of the things I learned in program management, right, is you invest money up front, and often saves you money on the back end. Like, we have seen the cost of remediation of an incident, and those costs are very large. I don't know if you follow the news. There was a recent incident that was not a cybersecurity incident, but it was an incident nonetheless that had some cybersecurity repercussions downstream. And some of the numbers that are put on the remediation of that are really large, right? And so that's kind of the thing, right? Hey, can we make a case, can CISA make a case that, hey, here's what we're seeing for like the cost of implementing secure by design up front or building security into your product. And here is the cost savings we think you'll have over the life cycle of that product, just by avoiding the potential incident, right? Cost avoidance. And so that's a lot of what we're doing there. Make sure I hit all my points there. Other things we're working on to kind of increase our scope, increase our impact, is we've got some stuff coming out in probably the next 3 months on operational technology. It's a much smaller group of folks that are doing OT versus IT, but it's just as important, right? When you look at all the sectors that we support, having some guidance for OT vendors is going to be very effective. Oh, and there's this thing called AI that is kind of a, hot button topic lately. And while admittedly we have more to do at CISA as far as putting out guidance on AI secure by design, the official CISA stance, and I will die on this hill, is AI is software, and software should be secure by design, right? So all the things we discussed in the pledge, right, they're not unique to AI. They're unique to software, or not even unique to software, but they're for software. AI falls under that. Now, is there additional stuff we'll have to figure out for AI? Yes, there is, right? And we know that. We're not naive. But at its core, AI is software. That should be secure by design. And the last thing that I'm trying to do to help make an impact, and this is my job, this is what I do, this is when I leave here today, I'm going to go take meetings on, is we have this initiative with a lot of inertia within CISA. It's being promoted out to all of our stakeholders, to anyone that'll listen about Secure by Design. We are willing to talk about Secure by Design. My job is to take this initiative and turn it into a program, turn it into something that lasts, something that endures, something that transcends political party, something that transcends administration, something that when Director Easterly leaves, Secure by Design continues on in CISA with the same vigor and the same enthusiasm as it's had to date. Even after I'm gone, I need Secure by Design to keep going because this is not a short-term problem. This is not we fixed it, right? This is a long-term play. And traditionally, the government has not been good at long-term plays, right? We get distracted by shiny objects sometimes. Leadership flips, administrations flip, priorities change, but we have to find a way for this to endure. And so that's really what my focus is over these next few months, is to make sure that Secure by Design endures no matter what happens in the future. All right, so I'm going to get to the call to action, the things that the people in this room that I would encourage you to do. Right? One, again, don't lose sight of the goal, right? The goal is way far out on the horizon. We're here. It's easy to get distracted. It's easy to get disheartened by all that space between you and the goal, right? But don't. We're here. If you ever need a pep talk, call me. I will give you one of my, I coach girls softball. I'll give you a girls softball pep talk, try to get you back re-engaged. But I know it's a lot. I know it's long, so don't lose faith. Keep staying the course. Be an advocate for Secure by Design. You're going to learn a lot here. You're going to take a lot of information back to where you came from today. Make sure you share that information from wherever you came from. If you haven't signed the pledge and you're in a position where you can influence that, please sign the pledge, right? And listen, not everybody can sign the pledge. It's cool. We're still friends if you don't sign the pledge, I promise, right? It's fine. But even if you're not in a position where you can influence that, again, be an advocate within your organization. If you need any kind of training materials, reach out to me. I'll happily share with you anything I have. If you need someone to come talk at a meeting, I'll happily come talk at a meeting, right? Or I will ask one of the people around me to come talk at a meeting. We'll try to find someone to come talk at your meeting and echo things that you've already said and support you in being an advocate in your organization. Celebrate the mundane. I was talking with, this was like in May, right after the pledge signing, a vendor I've known for a gentleman I've known for a really long time, works for a vendor, they hadn't signed the pledge, which is fine. No hate in my heart for that. But I asked him, I said, why haven't you signed the pledge? He's like, so much of that stuff we did a long time ago. He's like, we had MFA by default in place since I think 2019, pre-COVID, which feels like decades ago, let's be honest. And so I said, okay, that's great. So why is that preventing you from signing the pledge? He's like, I don't know. I just think it was that big a deal. And I was like, it's a big deal, right? Write about it. Share it. I don't care if you signed the pledge, blog about it. If you blogged about it in 2019, re-up that blog and update that blog. Put it back out, right? Celebrate that. That's a victory. You're ahead of the curve. Use that. We talk about creating differentiating factors for products. You're there. You've already achieved the goal. It might be mundane to you because it was 5 years ago, whatever, but it's a big deal, and you should celebrate that. And it's okay to celebrate the wins because they don't always come. And contribute to the data set, right? CVEs, timely, accurate, complete. The other thing I'll say about contributing to the data set is that, if you're interested in becoming a CVE numbering authority, a CNA, where you can assign your own CVEs, let me know. I don't do that, but the people I work next to organizationally do. And I'll happily make the connection for you if that's something you're interested in doing, interested in pursuing. All right, so these are some of the things I think you can do to kind of continue promoting Secure by Design. Now, I started this with a question, is our world secure yet? Right, it was a kind of play on Director Easterly's speech at Carnegie Mellon 18 months ago. Is the world secure yet? No, right? Again, not naive. We know what we're up against. It's not secure yet, but it can be a heck of a lot better than it is. Yeah? And it's not going to be easy. There are going to be some hard bits along the way. I often say that there are no 100% solutions. There's no magic or silver bullet. But there's 101% solutions. And some of those 1% solutions are going to be hard, but we can do it. We can do hard things. So what we do is we take these hard things and we engage them, and they become easier, and they become easier, and easier over time, right? Until one day, they're as easy as a single synchronous clap. Everybody with me on the count of 3? 1, 2, 3. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your conference. Yes, I have a question.
Oh, you want to hold it for me? Great, thanks. I'd like to know, I just went and looked on the pledge. Why is open source not mentioned on the pledge? It talks about corporations, but I'm a maintainer of a project, and I think it should be called out right there. Like, I would sign that and put it on our markdown, our security markdown and all that.
Yeah, it's a question we've gotten. We actually got a similar question. We had a meeting with all of our pledge signees, and that question came up. I think it's because our open source efforts are a little bit behind within CISA, right? So we have Ava Black is there. She's standing up a team. We're onboarding people, and we're building up that capability. Her and Jack Cable are leading the open source initiatives as far as secure by design. And they're really focused on what can be done. But in getting the pledge rolled out for RSA, the open source piece just wasn't quite there yet. But it will be. And there's a lot of, we've already published a lot of products that's gone out, and there will be more coming. And then they've also talked about, yeah, I think it's just more, the pledge went out a little bit before the open source stuff was ready, is the honest answer, to be fully transparent. Sorry. All right.
Gark, quick question. You mentioned economic development group about opening an office of something sorts. What was that? Did I miss something?
The economic analysis?
Yeah, could you expand on that? I apologize. I didn't exactly catch the description. Thank you.
Sure. And I am going to butcher this, and I can provide it later. But there was a 2002 study put out by NIST that was conducted by the Research Triangle Institute that looked at externalities in software development. I think they focused on the financial sector and maybe one or two other sectors. I don't recall off the top of my head. We're actually updating that study. It was 22 years, so a lot of updating needs to happen. DHS wasn't even a thing when that came out. But really looking at a quantitative analysis of the cost of secure by design, right? Really looking at, we're saying to do a lot of stuff, but there's cost to all that, and we acknowledge that. So are these costs prohibitive, or are they not prohibitive, right? Are these things that can be kind of baked in at the beginning to save, to avoid cost on the backs, on the end, to avoid incidents? Possibly, right? So that was kind of we're kicking off that study. Honestly, I wouldn't expect to see anything resulting from those studies until probably next calendar year, just because we're just kicking off the effort within the next couple of weeks. But
my question is, do you expect the Secure by Design pledge to be required as part of the federal acquisition regulations?
I don't think so. And I say that for a couple of reasons. To change FAR is a 4-year process, right? And so in 4 years, this pledge is a 12-month process. We're talking about what happens after this pledge for a vendor. If you sign it, what goes next? Now, could there be the potential for FAR updates for Secure by Design? Maybe. Right? There's always discussions, but there's nothing concrete in motion for that yet. And so if there were, it's like a 4-year process. So if everything goes according to plan. So nothing on the horizon, on the immediate horizon. Yes.
I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit about, I think it's the cyber strategy document, not the executive order from the White House that talks about sort of rebalancing market forces in one of their pillars, and sort of balancing the risk between consumers and manufacturers. Today manufacturers disclaim most all liability for their software. Canonical example, CrowdStrike, Delta, $500 million, the rest of it. How do you you guys must talk about this all the time. From your guys' vantage point, how do you kind of see this playing out in the next 5-10 years in terms of this initiative to try and rebalance the risks between customers and the software manufacturers?
It's a complicated question, right? But it's a good one. And it's one and to your point, we have talked about it a lot, where there was a panel internally last week talking about software liability and the progress we're doing. Like when I talked about the working groups earlier, internal to CISA, we have a policy working group that is diving into these issues on a more regular basis than I personally am. So it's not my area of expertise. But there's so many barriers to progress for us, but that doesn't mean we're not going to try, right? And so some of it is, a lot of what we've learned over time is when it comes to making big policy changes like that, like shifting liability or codifying a shift in liability, we're going to need a champion, right? And that's one of the things that we need to find, and a champion that might be bigger than CISA. And so that's kind of one of the things we're looking at is like, hey, who really cares about this and who would be willing to champion it along with us? But we know it's going to be a difficult process, and it's not something we anticipate will be easy. So I know that doesn't get to the details of your question, but it's definitely something that we're considering.